And I believe we are recording. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to the 5th Creative Play session. And as I think everybody knows, these sessions are designed to develop and share and explore exercises, creative exercises that we can use in the classroom with our students for drawing creativity out of our students, experiencing those exercises from the student point of view and feeling what they're like, which I find very useful for me to feel, for example, oh, I'm just getting into this exercise, and then you're moving on. No, I need longer to get my creative juices flowing. It's very useful for me to kind of intuitively feel how that's going to work for students. And also it's just nice to do some creative stuff because, I'm much too busy and I don't get to do the creative stuff. So Juan Carlos, Dr. Juan Carlos Carrillo Calimayor, you have a very long name.
Mexico, we use a lot of surnames.
The Universidad Panamericana is going to lead us in some creativity, and then we'll have some time afterwards to sort of feedback to Juan Carlos about how we experienced his exercises, and then maybe share some ideas for how they could be developed or tweaked or adapted, or just share some ideas that you guys use in class with your students too. So thank you very much for coming, and here is Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and to share with you, because we normally don't have the opportunity to do this, like with other screenwriting scholars and teachers and people. That I'm excited because you'll know a lot about this, and let's see how this works, right? So, how much time do we have, Chris? Just remind me.
Well, they usually run for an hour,
Okay.
and sometimes people hang around a little bit longer than that, depending on their schedule. But an hour.
Okay, great. So I'll explain what my proposal is, and I've done this a couple of times, but not in a very formal way. And I think that being a small tight group, we can play with it a bit. So I'm just like, as a, it's not a class obviously, but as a mini introduction to what I'm looking for, how do I get to this, I titled this ambitiously Seeking Truth and Fiction, because what I'm trying to get to is this: that I've experienced, and surely also you, that uh, you feel, even though you are having a invented story, a fictional story, you can feel when that comes from like a true place in the person's life. We've seen it in a lot of examples known in the industry, but I wanted to tell you a small anecdote that happened to me just this past November. And there's this student of mine that I've read some of his mostly short films and his ideas, and there were always kind of a cliche or in a very like basic formulaic thing, and I was like encouraging him to do something different. And time passed. He was my student like 2 years ago, but he's still in his last year at the university, and we keep talking about this thing. So in November, he sent me a different script. He said, "Hey, here's this short film," and it actually felt different. It felt more true to me. I think we can all sense that. Even we can sense in watching a film. And it was a very harsh subject. It was about a young guy that attempted suicide. So it was like a very delicate subject. And this is a delicate anecdote also. And as you can't know this guy, so that's why I'm telling it. Because I then have a meeting with him, and he was very nervous. He was like, "Hey, how are you? What do you think about the script?" And I told him, I think I felt it different from others. And he was like very nervous and very quiet and very sincere also. And he said, "Well, this is something that somehow happened to me, and I'm showing it." And I told him, after, of course, talking a bit about this but I told him, actually, you can tell that. Not that is your like story, but you can tell that this comes from a true place in which you were. And I said, and I think it's also therapeutical somehow, like for you to pass this experience of your turn it into fiction, because he added characters, he changed the names obviously and the situations, but it came from a true place. So uh, thinking on this exercise, I said, well, that's something that we can all find, obviously in different ways and changing it. uh, I'm not using it this part a lot, but there are different examples. No? For example, as you know, Alfonso Cuarón for Roma, he started thinking in his own youth, and he didn't talk in that film mainly about him, but in his memories he found there's this interesting character, the woman that took care of me when I was young, and he found there uh, this truth, personal thing that became universal. So this is something that I tell my students, and like the main of it, that personal, sharing something very personal becomes universal, because when we all listen to something that it's personal of someone, the human experience is so universal that we all engage with that, we all feel it's like our own, right? So we have like different examples of this. It's well known that this the Squid's Game, even though it's a very fictional, well, they're all fiction, but you know what I mean, like a very strange kind of sci-fi violent world. The screenwriter has said in some interviews that this came from him, like from, I was in a very bad moment, saying, what would I be capable of doing for money? And he invented this whole game thing. But you can feel like at the core of it that it comes from his experience. And well, this film also, uh, it's almost autobiographical, and you can feel it. So how? Um, uh, well, I'm just gonna pass this and go to the exercise. I did have in mind also this film, which in Mexico has been very controversial, even though it hasn't been yet screened here, and not even by Netflix, because I think it has to do a bit with this. I'm not staying there, but people in Mexico are feeling that this film, Emilia Perez, saying, well, it doesn't feel close to us. And of course, there are different opinions and stuff, but the thing is, I was reading an interview with the screenwriter and director Jacques Audiard, who is in France, and who said something like, maybe it was just a lapse or something, but he said something like, well, this is not something very close to me, but I wanted to tell the story, so that I think it feels original. So I just keep the quote, right, like saying, if it's not if it not come if it doesn't come from you, even though it's like a very good idea that it's somewhere out there, sometimes it can feel sorry, fake. It can feel like, mm, this is something that you are putting together, but it doesn't feel true. So my exercise, getting to it, is a way to share something personal, uh, and how to make that interesting, because also it's like, okay, we can all here share, I don't know, our mornings. That's what I tell my students. You can tell me what you did today, and probably it's not going to be very interesting. But there's this other exercise that actually comes from another place. I live in campus. I live in a student residence, and there's like this icebreaker uh, interaction thing that we do when someone is new, because there's like this after the meals, and people like get together and talk a bit. And when someone is new, the way to know him, we tell him, Hello, who are you? Tell us your name and tell us. This is kind of tell us your dearest. I'm sorry, your nearest death experience. A moment in your life in which you've been close to die or you felt that. So this sounds very tragic when you first place it. Actually, not always, but sometimes someone has turned very tragic on it. But normally, when people think about this, different things come out. Like mm, sometimes you can even tell in screenwriting terms like different genres there, because sometimes there are like anecdotes that, well, I was with my friends in the car and we were just in a party and somehow the car flipped and we all were laughing. And sometimes it depends on how the people tell the story. It depends on how they remember the story. It doesn't have to be like very tragical, because I'm aware that it can be a very like tragical exercise in the way to put it. But I think it's a way of thinking about our own experience and saying maybe there's a story here, maybe there's something there. So so that's something I do with with these guys in the residence. It's something I do with my students, and I've just done it once in a screenwriting environment with students, and funny things came out. I mean, because funny things, you can think it's paradoxical, it's a bit, but um, because sometimes it's like, oh, well, for example, all these stories have a happy ending because we're here, right? It's not necessarily a tragic outcome, but sometimes it's more like an adventurous, or sometimes it's more like with a contextual thing. No? Actually, I wasn't sure how many people will be here, but what I add to that, this other concept that is like the levels of conflict, in ways to improve this mini log line or mini short plot that is about the experience of someone. It's saying, okay, if it's very personal, or if it's very um, I don't know, if it's add other levels of conflict, and you can do it. We can have like a whole mini synopsis here, right? So as you know, we can mainly have like these three levels. No, the inner conflict of the character, a relational conflict, being a love story, being an antagonistic tale, being whatever it is, and also like this external conflict, that it can be with nature, with society, or just like a conflictive environment. And sometimes when you tell your dear, I'm always saying this, but your nearest death experience, sometimes when you tell it, you see that it has to do more with, for example, no, and with all due respect, we were talking about, of course, this um, the fires, right? Like in LA, and that's a clear external conflict, and there are stories happening there, and we can think about important um, stories that can move us with that, obviously with respect for the people that have been there near there. But fiction can be very respectful, and it can even be a homage for people fighting or for people surviving, and that can be very interesting also as well. Or you can have more like, oh, I want to talk about when this happened, because I don't know, so at least in Latin America, sometimes this uh, near death experience, sometimes they have like this criminal fact, or this, well, a couple of guys I've heard them, sorry, here in Mexico, speaking about that. Well, I went to party and there were people started shooting near the bar where we were and things like that. And sometimes it can be that kind of story, or more like an inner thing. So I wasn't sure that how many people would be here. Maybe what I think is that we can do this small exercise if you're willing to. You can also always say, well, it's not a story of mine, it can be someone else's. But the nearer we get it, I think it can be more compelling. And if we have time after that, we can maybe add a bit of levels of conflict, or while you say them, so we can make them like a bit more complex and a bit more also not so close to your own experience, but to have that seed in there that comes from that personal you. So does that sound okay? Is it understood? Mm, are you willing to? This is a very sincere thing, of course. So okay, thanks. I see some nodding. So who wants to go first? This is a courage thing. Can always think, and otherwise we're gonna have Chris to do it first because
No, no to
master.
me. So you want us to share our nearest death experience, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what experiences I've had. The thing that popped into my head was uh, when I was a little kid and I was playing with my brother and maybe some friends in the road outside our house, like playing chase or hide, some kind of game.
Okay.
And I think I must have been about six, 6 or 7 or something. And I ran out into the road and there was a car coming. And I like kind of instinctively like rolled. I did like a sort of commando roll. It's I was a 6-year-old commando basically. And the car was moving quite slowly, but I sort of bumped the wheel of the car, like the side of the wheel, and sort of bumped off.
Whoa.
And I remember feeling quite casual about it, quite unperturbed by it. But this kind of, uh, you know, traumatized woman got out of the car and was like, "What are you doing? Be careful!" And I remember feeling like, "What? What? We're just playing." I suspect that was that was probably the closest that I've come.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Chris, for sharing. I think there are, well, I'm leading the session, right? But you can all think as a screenwriter that there are potential important things there. I believe that maybe the interesting character in that story is maybe that woman driving. I don't know what you think about that, but
I agree.
because Small wasn't very aware of what happened. But I don't know. We can think about this woman. You see where I'm going, right? She's probably having a very bad day, or having a very confusing day, or having, and all of a sudden, a small kid just bounces with your tire. And if it were like 2 seconds before that, maybe she could have run over you, right? From what I understood. So, so that's something that I don't know if you want to add. Maybe what we can do to not be all over the place is like to add something to the story, to add some levels of conflict, and then we're not that many. We can pass one by one. But what would you add to this?
I think, yeah, I think I'd want to explore what was going on in her life, what she was dealing with up to that point, because it's like it's that would be an interesting um opportunity for indirection, wouldn't it? To indirectly, for that character to indirectly vent about whatever issues she's been dealing with her estranged partner and her own family or something. What are you doing? Be more careful. Or her parents or something, whatever issue she's dealing with in her life that she can't address directly. Suddenly this thing happens and it gets indirectly addressed to 6-year-old commando Chris.
And it's also like a very external, um, very something that can happen in every street, but at the same time something very external that you don't see it coming, and it can change like your whole, you're in your own problems, and somehow you this conflict that we can imagine for this woman, and all of a sudden it's like not only what happened but also what didn't happen. Like I could have killed this boy. Well, I wouldn't have killed him on purpose, but this boy could have died under my car, and all of a sudden it's here. It didn't happen. What would I do with that?
It's a very intimate moment as well, having like a near death experience. There's a really, really interesting piece of microfiction, like a one-page microfiction, I think by Dave Eggers, and it's maybe called Accident or The Accident, and it's about a narrowly averted car crash, or he crashes into these teenage boys. I think he's like the protagonist is a middle-aged man, crashes into these teenage boys, and like kind of gets out and like sort of talks to them and shares insurance information or something, or expresses I'm glad no one got hurt. And then suddenly at the end of the story, there's this like eruption of emotion from inside the character who suddenly feels intensely connected to these teenage strangers and intensely lonely because he suddenly realizes how deep that connection he's having is and how void of deep connections his life is. Really, it's really good piece of microfiction.
By the way, just a second, Paul, but the whole urban city experience, it's very potentially filled with this kind of conflicts. There are actually films that are about that. Like, remember Crash, that film from Paul Greengrass, and also, well, in Mexico, Amores Perros, which is very famous. There are people who are on their own, and all of a sudden, you are very near to other persons who have nothing to do with you, but you can actually crash with them, or you can have like this accident, and suddenly your different lives change by something that it was unexpected, and something, and it could be life changing, right? So the city makes this, and cars and vehicles make these possibilities. Paul, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I had a question. That's an interesting take on it, to go to the woman in your memory. And you probably remember roughly maybe what age she was, what point in life. Was it a grandmother? Was it a 20-year-old, whatever? And my question is, going back to what Juan Carlos was talking about, your own experience, what was your experience after this? Do you remember? You didn't think much of it, or what was going on with you?
Yeah, I don't remember anything around it at all, really. I just remember that the moment of it, and I remember this woman getting out of the car, who in my memory is like sort of 30s, but maybe she was like 20 because
Uh-huh.
6 or 7. And yeah, no, I just remember not feeling scared at all. I just feeling like a kid who bumped into a thing and seeing her reaction, and maybe the reaction of my older brother as well, and just
Well,
being quite blasé about it and like, sorry.
because that's the other way. You were commando, right? When you just escaped death, you didn't even know, you didn't know what it meant. I mean, you remember it
All in a
now,
day's
but
work.
at the time, right? So it suggests a different story to me, which would be a comedic take on it, which is, here's a kid who's a commando who goes through a series of adventures and is totally unaware of how close he's coming to death. He goes to the next thing and he almost does this and something else happens. And he's basically, this kid is terrifying. It's a whole story takes place in one morning where he terrifies all these adults thinking they're about to kill him. And he's blasé about it. And then, so what happened today? Well, I don't know. I had some fun with some friends.
All the adults around freaking out constantly.
Right. Anyway.
He's nearly
I love
died
that so
again.
much.
Yeah. Good.
So as you see, it's interesting because you can start having different outtakes from it, like even in different genres and in different. I wasn't sure. I was going to ask Chris, maybe in your house the reaction was bigger, like, I don't know, your parents or something, like, or you didn't tell anyone in particular, as you didn't feel it. So I don't know, dangerous.
I suspect I probably didn't tell.
Yeah, it's like Paul says, no, like this kid. Okay, so you want to add something else to this? I mean, you can see like the point of it and how from there you can take a whole, but maybe we can listen to someone else's experience now. And
I'm happy to share one.
go ahead, Susie, please.
So, it's probably, I was in my early 30s, and my grandfather died a while before, and I was driving along the M4 in the UK, and I braked, and I don't know if you've ever hit oil on the road. Zero control, and everything went into slow motion. And the fast lane of the M20, it was the M4 motorway, and the car spun around. So I was going backwards very fast in the fast lane of the motorway, and I steered into the central reservation to slow it down, and it stopped. And I remember just being very calm and thinking, there'll be a lorry now, and that'll be it. And I was completely fine with it, because I guess I was in a sort of shock. And there was this gap, and this man raced up, got out of his car, jumped out the back, pulled out bollards and things that he just happened to have in his boot. And then the lorries started coming, and they went around. And then the police arrived, drove my car, did a U-turn, having blocked off the motorway, parked the car over. I got in the car, and then off I went as if nothing had happened. But what was weird, and I'll never forget, is as I was spinning around and thought, this isn't good, I was completely aware of my grandfather. It's like he was there. And I've never had an experience like that before or since, actually. So that was my experience.
How old were you?
Uh-huh.
I was, I think probably early 30s.
Can I
Okay.
bounce off that really quick,
Please.
Juan Carlos?
Please do wanna-
Well,
please.
I wanted to say that my near-death experience, I had a very similar moment of going, okay, well, here we go. Like I fought. And then when it became clear that I was going to die and there was nothing I could do, it was just a complete giving in. And there is something about that particular moment in storytelling. I don't know where it falls or what, we can all do different things with it and put it in different genres, but it's an interesting moment. I was a child, so that's why I asked how old you were.
I think that also, like, the moment you live it in, for example, Chris is a very, you can say, unconscious child of what's going on, or a different moment in life, it can also make like this kind of thoughts, and that somehow, even when you tell the story, you are like establishing, in this case, like a genre or a meaning to it, because what Susie shared, for example, it's from the outside, you can just look, okay, maybe it's a car accident or a car hazard, but making it personal, it's like, well, for me, I connected somehow, or I felt the presence of my grandfather. So I think that also helps crafting, also even characters and character arcs, like maybe we're using this moment, specific cathartic moment, for this character to feel something or to find something, things like that. So cars are dangerous, as you can see. So, but they also allow all these kind of stories. So I don't know.
I have
Yeah,
another story with the cars, as we're talking about cars and dangers. I was at a crossroads, not many years ago, possibly 4 or 5 years ago, and I was at crossroads, and it's an experience because I didn't have a death experience. So I was in a crossroads and I was daydreaming or something. The green light was on, and I was just looking at the flowers and the birds and blah, blah, blah. And it would be around about 10 seconds or more, and a car crossed the red light with really high speed. If I had driven through my green light, then I would be gone. The interesting thing was that even though I didn't actually I didn't have the near-death experience, I was the next week I was living a kind of a parallel world. I couldn't cross any pedestrians or any, everything that had
traffic light, and as if I wasn't there, as if I wasn't in this world and I was in another world. I couldn't believe that I was alive and I'm still alive, seriously. So although I did have a near-death experience once, but this was even more shocking for me than living through the thing. It was luck, wasn't it? I don't know. So writing and dreaming is good for you, for your health, and you know.
Yes. No, driving is, I don't know, some of these stories, especially in the modern world, it's normally where some accidents happen and where, but I think that the meaning that you give to it, it's also very interesting, because being an experience, it's not because you can tell people, and that's not what we're doing, like think of ways that people can die or be in danger, but making it personal is this what we're doing, like saying this for me meant this part of I don't know, maybe it was luck, or maybe it was somehow it hadn't had a dead outcome, but for me it meant something. And I think that from there we can like work characters and stuff and levels of conflict, what I was saying.
Because I write parallel worlds, I like this sort of multi-universe thing, and possibly that's why I thought of it that way. I don't know. As you said, it's personal. It's very different. So yeah.
Yes.
Possibly.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I'm finished.
I was just going to say, Anna left us on a cliffhanger. It would be really good to know what actually happened.
Please, Anna.
Definitely.
Mine was not a car. Mine was, I was probably 9 or 10, and my sister and I, there were these two really handsome, like 20-year-old boys, and we were on one of those blow up raft thingies that's like round, and there are these strings that you hold on to, but it was massive. And I was kind of like in love with one of these guys, so like not really paying attention to the way things were. And they said, unhook yourself, we're going to knock you over. And I just wasn't paying attention. And so I was still like sort of strapped in with my legs or whatever. And then they pushed it over, and it was so big, like I was hooked up and my leg didn't touch the ground and I couldn't get over, it was too big. And it went on and on and on, and my sister's legs were down there. And so I fought and fought and fought, until it was like clear I was just going to drown. And then one of them pulled me up, and I just remember seeing my dad on the dock, just like freaking out. So, but there's a difference. I think it's an interesting thing from a storytelling perspective when the character has time to contemplate, and when it's like in an instant, right? And that's sort of where in a storytelling mode where you go into the alternate. I also think that's interesting what Nikki, what you were saying about this alternate parallel universe, because I was thinking that from Chris's story, like if I were the mom, if I were the woman driving that car, like I would be doing what if I had hit him? What if I had killed him? And what if I didn't? I would be doing the sliding doors. There'd be.
So Anna, did you wind up marrying the guy that rescued you from the from the thing?
He's still so handsome though, and he recently won. And he recently won some kind of like science teacher, high school teacher of the year award for the whole of the United States.
It had to do with aqua dynamics, it had to do with the inflatable balloon. That's his field. I rescued this girl once. I almost killed her.
Maybe. That's all
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I don't know, Juan Carlos, if you have other exercises besides near death. I mean, to me, we're clustered around before the age 10 here for some reason, but a really toe curling experience I had that I still am traumatized by when I was like 9. My older brother and his older friend were playing, and they wouldn't play with me And it really pissed me off this one day. I mean, I was so pissed. It sounds so trivial, but in that world, I was angry. I went to my mom. She was not available emotionally. She was saying a rosary in her, chair. And okay, I got to solve this. I went to the kitchen and I grabbed some knives and I was going to kill them. I mean, I was so enraged. And it was lucky that one of the kids was stronger. He just grabbed my hands. But I go back to that. It's like, I could have killed somebody. That's obviously that's an emotional story. That's personal. I don't know if there's a story that I would even want to spin from that one, but it's interesting, this clustering around. Although Susie, you were older when you went through yours, but
I remember trying to. I mean, I wasn't thinking kill him, but I could have done with my brother. So I think that's a really interesting one of when did you nearly either intentionally or not through your actions could easily have killed someone. I think that's a really great question to be asking.
It's curious, right? Because sometimes, or many times, these stories are in our childhood, and it's something that we don't, well, maybe as creative people, maybe we do, but normally people don't think a lot about their early years, their childhood. And it's the places that you go when you find stories, where you look for them. There's even that quote that I won't remember who said it, but something like, everyone who had a childhood, that means everyone, can write a novel, something like that, because of course, even though from the outside it's like a normal, or could be a normal childhood, for the person who is in process of growing, it's like, this really changed me. This really marked me. I don't know. Paul's story maybe told from someone else who was, we saw him that he took a knife, but he wasn't going to do anything. But for you, it's like, I was willing to kill, like, and I think helping people go back there, it's also helpful. I choose the death thing because I think that's easier for people to think in something specific. It's not that, well, specific and important somehow, because the main thing is like, just help people go through their own experience. But sometimes when you do that with students and such, it's like, okay, but my experience is so vast, and sometimes they tell you, I don't have really something very interesting. But when you say you've been near to death, people start thinking, or they say, well, I haven't been near to death, but there was this time, and something interesting comes out. So that's kind of the idea. I don't know if someone else wants to share of someone what has also feedback for this exercise, which I would love to. I think some interesting ideas have come out, but what do you think? Or
well, I have a question, but maybe someone else wants to share before we dive into sort of questions. Anyone else got stuff to share? It's good to share.
I shared murder, but not near death. Somebody else is near death. That's fine with me. I don't need to do that. Let somebody else be traumatized.
Well, the question that I was going to ask was that you were talking at the start of the session about your student script and how you could feel a difference when he had put himself into the script. And yeah, I agree completely. There's something about particularly in terms of observing my students. There's some students they put, I think, emotional vulnerability, let's say, onto the page somehow. And in my experience, it's rare, very rare. I think I see that maybe I get one student in a class, maybe, who is putting that emotional vulnerability onto the page, and it's radiating off the page, and I'm having a similar reading experience to you, thinking like, I just connect to it. I feel the emotion. And sometimes that's because they're putting biographical stuff into it. I had in the last group of MA scripts that I marked this summer, I marked one script that was by far, by a million miles, the best student script I'd ever read. It broke my heart into a million pieces in the best way, and it was a very autobiographical story about her close friendship when she was a teenager with a very troubled friend who was experiencing sort of a abusive family dynamic, and her burgeoning sexuality and feelings for this friend that were going beyond friendship. Beautiful, beautiful script, and it was just so psychologically real and emotionally real, and it was brilliantly done. But I also think that you can feel that sense of authenticity and that sense of someone exploring something that's close to them, like you were talking about, Juan Carlos. In non-autobiographical stuff, David Lynch, I think, who's, rest in peace. I think there's an awful lot of autobiography below the surface, I think, with David Lynch's stuff. And I think it's very, very vulnerable and emotional, but below this incredibly oblique surface.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there's if you have any techniques or any thoughts about how to get that closeness, that sense that the subject material what's being written about is very close to the writer, that sense of authenticity and vulnerability, but when they're not writing autobiography.
I think that, well, I don't have like an answer for that. Maybe someone does, and we'll be happy to hear them. But I was thinking, as you said, that maybe it's like also a two-way movement, because if you start like in something close to you, and then by creativity you start adding things. I don't know, there's this famous TED talk by Andrew Stanton where he says that when he was born very sick, and his parents thought that they told him that he was gonna die, but he survived, and that made him special somehow. And through that, he came with the Finding Nemo story, which is about fishes in the sea, but of course it's like this parent that is overprotecting of his son. So he started from something very personal, and then started adding things, as to put it in some. I think that maybe I don't know David Lynch's life or experience, but maybe something like that. Because what I find as a problem in students, and as they are younger, I find it more, is that they start looking out. It's like, and especially here in Mexico, that we look to Hollywood like it's the main movies that we see. So things that I correct, for example, is when they deliver a script in Spanish, of course, and the names are like John, Chris, and it's like, and they write in Spanish, but they'd say it was this is happening in Wisconsin, something like that. And and I said, why is this? Oh no, because, well, and it's the stories they have in mind. So I try to help them that, no, maybe the names are Juan, Maria, it's near you. Maybe it's happening in a small town here in Mexico. And maybe the next step after that would be, okay, what if this happens in Mars in the year 3000, something like that? But helping them find something personal and then going out, because otherwise you're just, it's things that sound good to you, but I don't think that, it doesn't sound very real when you read it, right? What do you think, Susie? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you to specifically do biographical storytelling exercises. I went on years ago on a weekend storytelling course, and it was all biographical, and I thought, I want to make stuff up. But it was very very therapeutic, but also it was really interesting to craft your own life in a story. And then nothing to do with screenwriting, but another part of my life in 2019, I did a TEDx, and I had to experience very difficult times of my life and turn them into a story. And the hardest part is not get hung up on this happened then, and that you literally have to let go of it and then think, what is the real story that is in this, which in itself is a very powerful thing, but quite hard to do because a lot of people get stuck on the so-called reality. But as a writer, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's what you create. And now I think I've changed my past based on that storytelling, and I don't honestly know quite what happened when, but it makes more sense to me, so I'm happier with that. Makes a better story. So I wondered if you'd done any of that biographical type of work with students.
Not specifically. I just try to use it like as a tool for them to find truer stories, but I agree. I once, as a not moderating but participating, I did this kind of autobiographical, and it was this exercise. You've probably done it, or that you had to think of something that you would tell someone that you've never told that person before, because they passed away or because you are mad with them or whatever. So you write it, and then this teacher, whose name I won't remember, I'll try to, he just made us say it, like to just pick a person, whoever, and say it to them. And then he asked, after it was very cathartic, also very therapeutical, but you took out all that, and it was something very personal to you from your own life. And the instructor would say, who felt related with what this person has just said? And obviously everyone, or mostly everyone, said, of course. And for me, I was just starting on this, and it was very powerful to say, hey, this works, right? This is it's obvious, it's my emotions, but it's there. So yes, sometimes I don't do it that autobiographically, but it does help.
I use reframing based on, I do a kind of experiential sort of exercise about what the students want or a writer wants, really. And it goes from a very superficial level, like, what do you know about yourself, how old you are, the size of shoes you wear, blah, blah, blah. It goes down to what you want. And then the students, based on this experience, they write what the character wants. And it has to feel the same way. They have to replicate the feeling of what they want towards a character, even though it's kind of an alien on a spaceship or whatever. But because its character has to, want something and create the plot based on what they want or what they need. So I find it useful to do that, to replicate the feeling, not the actual,
I like it. Like
object of
you're
desire.
in your fictional world already, and you take that true feeling, to put it there.
Yeah, just the feeling. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Go ahead, Ashish.
Thanks for this exercise, Juan. It was really interesting. And the only thing I'd add here, kind of taking from what Nikki was saying, is that I think like sometimes when you're diving into personal situations for like personal experiences for inspiration, like I think it sometimes helps also to note actions, like a little bit detached from emotion, like in the sense like what are people going after? What do they want? Things like that. Like, for instance, in Anna's anecdote, I think what's very dramatically interesting is that, like that she kind of found this boy attractive and that she likes him. Then from there, that leads to like, okay, what if she was trying to impress him? And then this happens. And suddenly the situation becomes very comedic. So very little details like that can really transform a personal situation. With also very little effort. So sometimes it's very helpful to think, okay, like if Chris is running across the road, what is he running towards? Is it an ice cream truck, or is it like Is it a game that he's heading for, or is his dad in the hospital? These are three very different stories. So I think like sometimes exploring these details and noting them can be quite helpful.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Totally agree. And by the way, I was over Anna's story. It's also very visual, right? I think it's trying to write in images as we should. It works because it has like this whole, you know, the way you described it, this bubble thing and the situation with the guy. It's like I can see it, you know, and it could work even in different genres. Yeah, totally agree. Okay.
Anna, your story reminded me of a short story collection by Julie Oringer. Anyone know Julie Oringer, fiction writer? She wrote a brilliant, it's my favorite short story collection called How to Breathe Underwater. Typing it in the chat just because I like sharing, spreading the word about this. Julie Oringer, she teaches in somewhere in New York, I think. It's a brilliant short story collection. And
I'll look it up. Thank you.
Yeah, your experience could have been in that book.
Maybe she and I are connected in some way. I might have to reach out to her.
Susie has said, what is the end time? Yeah, so they're nominally it's an hour, and then we kind of wrap up around an hour-ish. So we can kind of wrap up now. If anyone has should we take a final comment or question? If anyone has one.
I thought it was great. I think it's so interesting. I mean, what a interesting way to approach how to work with students about, taking this moment of high conflict and sort of bouncing off of that and where to go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I loved it. Thank you because this really is helpful for me, not only for the experience, but also to test these things. You're trying to put what you have, and somehow it says, well, it does work. And hearing that you guys agree, it's really great for me. And thank you, Chris, for organizing.
I hope this was not a traumatic experience for you, although if it was, you could write about it now. And we'll be happy to contribute. No, I do think when students write from the way you're talking about, that the biggest difference I notice is that you get more specifics. You don't get generic characters. You get really specific things, and that's what makes people smile when they hear it. Because it's like they're reporting back the truth of what they've experienced, and that's always specific. Yeah.
Everybody really wants to share too. I don't know if you guys all felt that. And that was one final question I was going to have for you, Juan Carlos, was if you have a class of 20 students, it seems like everybody deserves a chance to share their near-death story, and that could take an hour and a half. Do you know what I mean? You could so sort of how we, right? How we slow that down and yet still give everybody a chance to share. Because I found, I wanted to hear everybody's stories.
Same here.
Yes, at the start it's no one wants to talk because it's well, this is very, but when you start hearing, it's and then you remember, and sometimes people even interrupt themselves, and it's oh no, wait, I had a better one, but yes, I mean, you can split them, of course, but it helps because people want to talk, of course, people want to share. And
right. And I'm sorry I haven't really had that kind of near-death experience, but in the future I'll look out for it. I'll see if I can come up with something, and then I'll report back on that. I'll do some dangerous stuff.
I love the near murder, though. I think the comedic near murder is fabulous.
The murder was okay. Okay, the murder was okay. I won't engage in any risky behavior.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Juan Carlos. We'll wrap it up there. And Anna is doing the next session next month, so come back and enjoy whatever Anna has to offer. And I'll see you then, I hope.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you, Carlos. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.